and that can be for the bad, right?
That's right. That's right. So,
I mean, do you want to discuss what happened in Alabama by not being sensitive to this? Or
sure. So in Alabama, a law was held unconstitutional. Now, it used a lot of the same medical science, but the court said, all the medical associations, and it cited them all, said they believe that providing at least hormone therapy. Now, the judge said, I'm going to hold the whole court later on about these surgeries, but providing hormone therapy and all that sort of stuff, well, you just shouldn't butt your nose in to parents making decisions they think, relying on medical evidence, is in the best interest of their children. So I've tried to say to people, so what if the government came along and said, you must give your child a COVID shot, or you cannot give your child a COVID shot, or any other number of things the government, based on medical science, might say, and you'd say, like, hell, no way, that's my child. Well, how do you distinguish between those kind of medical decisions and hormone therapy, particularly if medical science is saying the hormone therapy is not totally harmful and destructive, and you ought to start it as soon as you can, and hopefully these things will work itself out. So my concern is that the state, in trying to protect against this liberty argument, I guess, and some of the failures, has said, well, the state has a legitimate interest in protecting children from emotional harm. And I've been saying to some of the leaders and our attorney general, what's the legal definition of emotional harm? What's it rooted in? How do I know what is emotional harm and what is just craziness? What's the legal definition of that? Where will that be used next? Then they said the state has a legitimate interest in promoting the dignity of children. Now, Michael, I guess you would have some people in your audience who said the way you're raising your children is denying them dignity. Now, what if the medical societies, the psychiatric associations, came along and said, your overt Christianity stuff is denying dignity. Taking your children to Trump rallies. Or
they're doing it subtly, but they're going to do it abruptly. By the way, you want to share with them the last three lines? I love the last three lines of the Obergefell ruling, and that is that their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness, excluded from one of the civilization's oldest institutions. All right, so, but if you want to, and I don't even get, I'm obviously not a fan of the Obergefell ruling, but I don't even get this. All right, so if somebody goes through this as a child, or even because the child has been influenced by influential parents, pointing them into areas of question. I remember distinctly playing with dolls as a young child. Nobody started giving me doubts about whether I was a boy and ushered me down a road of drugs that could have later. I mean, we're looking at medically, 88% of girls figure this out by the time they're done with puberty, and it's even higher among boys. So what about the emotional harm when they're 18 or 21 and they realize God didn't mess up, they're in the right body? Isn't that the very emotional harm? Isn't that the damage has been done, and now you're trapped in loneliness? It's amazing how Obergefell is going to actually only betray what it was trying to ultimately achieve. I was struck by that irony. Yeah. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah. So the
clearly it needs definition. Clearly.
That's right. So in the last two sentences of Obergefell, you started reading it. People don't want to be excluded from these institutions. They ask for equal dignity in the eyes of the law. The Constitution grants them that right. Now, let me tell you where this goes. Already, the circuit courts in the Fourth Circuit, the Second Circuit, the Sixth Circuit, and I think it's the 11th Circuit, have distinguished between biological sex and gender identity. Now, you and I would say, no, they're the same. A female is a she. A female would never be a he. But they draw a distinction between those two. And so what the courts are referring to now is treating equally cisgendered and transgendered children, because they all have a gender and we should all treat them equally. And to deny the transgender child the same kind of dignity as the cisgendered child, denies them equal protection. Now, for those who don't keep up with all this terminology, cisgendered is now the term of art that says Michael DelGirono and David Fowler are cisgendered because
there's something wrong with us, not them. All right, let me cut to the chase on that note. 1017, David Fowler joining us with the Family Action Council of Tennessee. There's probably some in my audience that are going, why don't you just leave these people alone? Why are we always? What do we care what they do? And I want to give you the opportunity to defend the Republicans in the legislature that are having the courage to clarify this for the court, because deep down it has nothing to do with hating people who are different than us. It has everything to do with the cultural wokeness creates legal chaos. And then, it's one thing for a culture to be more relativistic or humanistic or anything goes and debaucherous, but you can't have the law follow that. I mean, it's one thing for one person to do it, and it might be an individual tragedy, but when you start doing it across the board corporately for everyone, that's where chaos creeps in. Somebody has got to step in and make some rules. If you're born a boy, there's got to be a way to acknowledge that. If you're born a girl, you can make any other choices after that, but we can't let cultural wokeness turn into legal chaos. Am I catching the spirit right? At least that's my spirit.
No, you are. And actually, Clarence Thomas, God bless that man, in the dissent in Obergefell, said, wait a minute, dignity was understood at the time the Constitution was drafted as rooted in the fact that man was made in the image of God. Dignity did not come from the law.
It preceded
slaves
it. The law came from
right.
it. Right.
So he said slaves didn't lose their dignity because they were enslaved, nor did they get more dignity when they were freed, because dignity was inherent in the very nature. They were made in the image of God, male and female. What we're ultimately warring over, is there a God who has defined what dignity is and what constitutes emotional harm? And what I can't get the legislature to do is to actually say, what is the standard by which this amorphous assertion of dignity and emotional harm is to be defined in the future? If you don't define it, some federal judge will define it for you, and you may not like his definition.
Anybody can abandon God, his way, his truth, his life, and a culture of God. But collectively, if you try to abandon God, you have to abandon being a republic, which is why the left is always referring to us as a democracy. That's part of what we're seeing at play here. Yes, right. And if we can't get it straight on the sex of a child at birth, the story was that male swimmer that's transgendered, walking around the locker room with his male genitalia out, and these women are like all horrified. I mean, if you can't figure that out, we got much bigger questions and much bigger areas to protect if we're to maintain our republic. Benjamin Franklin nailed it when he said it's a republic if you can keep it. We're losing it, but this is and the fact that we're losing it is that we can't even figure this out. All right, so in 60 seconds, what does this legislation do? What does it not do that the left is going to accuse it of doing?
Well, it says that healthcare providers cannot begin hormone therapies or do any surgical changes to a child. Okay, that's good. What it doesn't address is, how do we define the scope of a parent's rights with respect to their children? That's exactly what the ACL argued. Is the government can't stick its nose into the parent-child relationship for just any reason, and the bill doesn't give us a reason other than the ambiguous emotional harm that could be anything, or dignity harms, which gave us same-sex marriage. So you let a federal judge under Obergefell define dignity, and parents may have lost all their rights. And I can't get the legislature to define those terms and root them in anything other than, well, this is what a doctor says. Well, some days doctors are going to say, you and I are crazy the way we're raising our children. You shouldn't be taking them to a Trump rally or an NRA rally or a God Save America rally, because those are emotional harms. As the world becomes more evil, evil will be the norm.
It will be. Yeah. Well, it already is becoming that. I saw the Grammys. All right, make a long story short, there are a few courageous doctors. I'm not correcting you, but there are a few, but they're about as few as there were courageous doctors during COVID. The reality is you're going to create far more loneliness, far more destroyed emotions and hearts and feelings by doing things irreparable that by an 80 to 90% proclivity clear up on their own through puberty. You would think that'd be some medical evidence. Any question in your mind, this is ultimately like everything going to have to go to the Supreme Court. We don't have a God, so we have the Supreme Court, and then you cross your fingers and hope they get it right?
Yeah, I hope so. And that's my concern, is that when you don't define this state interest in promoting dignity, when you don't define the nature of it, what's the grounding of it? Clarence Thomas said dignity is grounded in made in the image of God, not anything to do with what medical science says. If you don't ground it right, and that goes to the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals, somebody's going to take Obergefell and say dignity is the right to define and express your identity. The bill's unconstitutional, and besides, you're interfering with the rights of parents to protect their child's constitutional rights. And I'll bet you every member of your audience would say, if a parent doesn't have a right to protect their children's constitutional rights, then parents have no rights. Can't drive home that point.
Yeah, and I think I would imagine factn.org, if they want to hear more than just sound bites and newscasts and really get to the bottom of this issue and what's at stake, I would tell you that this is where cultural wokeness meets legal chaos.
That's right.
And
That's right.
we haven't had a great batting average on these types of things. And then
we've lost in every court we've been in. Yeah.
There you go. God bless you. I appreciate this. Thanks for breaking this
and
explaining this here first. God bless you. Thank you. That's David Fowler with the Family Action Council of Tennessee. I encourage you to go to factn.org. If he doesn't have it up already, I'll bet you he'll have a teaching video on this. All right, King Insurance and Associates. I made the switch. So glad I did. They're going on 30 years in business. And in that 30 years, we have kept relationships, great relationships with the biggest, best insurance companies and highest rated, and we've weeded out the bad ones. That, along with being an independent agent, is key. As an independent agent, we can shop multiple companies on your behalf, and we don't just say it, we do it. And we weeded out the bad ones. So when I went to them, I was coming from a 10-year independent agent, and they beat them by 40%. And that was for better coverage on my home, better coverage on my contents, and my automobiles. Plus, I had a champion in my corner. I started telling the story on the air. My listeners started making the switch. They saved the same or more. Spence saved $1,300, Brian $1,600, Deb $1,800, Laura in the building $2,300. But don't switch because I did or they did. Switch because you should. Whether you're a family, an individual, or even a company, you deserve this better coverage, and I know you have use for the money you'll save. So get a Royal Review today and start saving in days and all year long. Make the switch to King because you should. 329-8121. 329-8121. That's 329-8121. Online at tkinginsurance.com.
Got an update on that so-called drag show bill in the state legislature over in our nation's capital. New developments involving the House Oversight Committee and Hunter Biden. These stories and more at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, all is not hopeless, Ken. Here's a sensible Democrat. A Democratic lawmaker in Arkansas rallied immediately on Twitter to defend the newly elected governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, from criticism thrown at her by Governor Gavin Newsom, who some think may even be a presidential hopeful. Taking to Twitter, Newsom attempted to criticize Sanders for verbally being anti-crime while governing a state that has one of the highest murder rates. I think you even know where the defense is going, but his exact tweet, while Sarah Sanders Huckabee touts public safety, here's what she skips over. Arkansas has one of the highest murder rates in the nation, the governor tweets. In a swift response, Representative Andrew Collins, standing ovation, quickly responds to Gavin Newsom. By the way, the beginning is as important as the end. In fact, I may love the end more. One, she's been governor a month. Two, there are drivers of crime like poverty, lack of education, lack of opportunity that Arkansas needs to fix in order to reduce violent crime. They're generational, and they're not unique to Arkansas. Three, don't trash my state. But what I love about it is there is a push comes to shove, right? Mm-hmm. You ever notice that? I mean, we can have fights with each other every now and then. Some listener gets online and starts bashing one of us. You better duck. Yeah. You know, but that normally doesn't exist. You'll see, a Democrat just jump in. I give this guy credit. We need more Andrew Collinses. That's the solution.
Well, and Gavin Newsom's from California. You're going to talk about violent crime in another state?
The first one is the most relevant. Are you kidding me? Look at your crime, and you've been governor going on 2 full terms.
Yeah.
She's been governor 1 month. That's the most significant. Secondly, he's giving back the Democrat platform beliefs. You know as well as I do, it has nothing to do with the governor. The drivers of crime are poverty, lack of education. By the way, and some of this is very
interesting.
It's very accurate. And then but the best was 3. I could tell you a lot of reasons to go to hell. But here's the last one. Don't trash my state.
Right. That's very Arkansan right there.
We almost need something, like, wherever you are, dear Heavenly Father, bless Andrew Collins today. That's my kind of an American, even though we probably have very little politically in common. We have a lot of character in common. David Zanotti joins us next on the Big W News Time.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. And right now in Tennessee, a bill that restricts drag show performances and others has passed the state Senate. This bill classifies performances by male or female impersonators, along with go-go dancers, exotic dancers, and strippers, as an adult cabaret performance that cannot take place on public property or in a location that could be viewed by a child. And right now in our nation's capital, the House Oversight Committee investigating whether President Biden had any involvement in foreign business dealings has formally requested business records of the president's son, Hunter Biden, the president's brother, James Biden, and their former business partner. And right now in Tennessee, back here in Tennessee, state lawmakers considering a bill that forces community oversight boards in cities with at least 500,000 people to forward claims of police misconduct to police internal affairs. That is before the Community Oversight Board can conduct its own investigation. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, at 10:36, we have fair skies and 61 degrees in Nashville at WTN. The market yesterday, of course, we lost what we gained on Tuesday. Today was looking like we were going to gain back what we lost yesterday and get back to what we gained on Tuesday. Now it's dipping down a little bit. So we're going to call the market slightly up and volatile. The Dow is up 76. NASDAQ is up 24. The S&P is up right now $6.58 at 41.24. Overall, the market's really not going a heck of a lot in any direction. I want to talk to you about Loan Pronto. I know a lot of you think that mortgage rates are still sky high. You need to think again. Rates have plummeted to 5-month lows. And if you call my friends at Loan Pronto, you can find out real quickly just how low they have gone. It might be time to get back to shopping for houses. Maybe you took some time off house hunting. You can get back to it. APRs are in the 4s. Some of you want to just refinance because you locked in the 6s or 7s when things were crazy. Or maybe you got a lot of credit card debt, and the interest rates on those are just fleecing you to death. You can use the equity in your home, refinance, get the lower rate, get your house in financial order. It's quick, it's easy. Wipe out all those credit cards, close in 14 days, cut your overall expenses, free up cash flow to afford inflation, get rid of all debt attached to variable rates as we head into recession. 499-5780. Lock in your rate today at Loan Pronto. 499-5780. That's 499-5780. Online at loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender at MLS 1661781. Subject to lender approval. Well, I've been trying to get to David all morning long. I'm having to dodge panic attacks, make car journeys. But I think we're finally here. Now I can't find him on my screen. Where did I put him? There you are. Sorry. I got
all
more.
that's left now is technical difficulties.
Oh, gosh, don't even speak those words. I heard when I got in the car and started racing home, my baby brother was talking about how his father worked in the suns of Georgia, 120 degrees. It really isn't like that. It doesn't matter. It's not that I'm a wimp and I can't be in a studio with no air circulating at over 100 degrees. It just triggers panic attacks. It'd be like if I had a fear of heights that triggered panic attacks. I said, today you're going to do your show on a cliff, hanging half over. I can't control it. And so I know what the symptoms are when they come on. And if I had stayed much longer, it was going to be bad. So anyway, a little break. So it gave you an hour to do something. Maybe you had a little Eggs Benedict or something. I know.
Yuck. One of my least.
Well, I know, but
you know what?
Deb's always whipping up something fancy for you while I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly
Eggs
sandwich.
Benedict is still on my anti-bucket list. Never tasted it. Never will. Yuck.
You're going to be in a good mood today. We got a lot of Disney stories. I mentioned earlier that cultural wokeness leads to legal chaos. It also leads to woke is broke. We started the day with Disney, and then I shared with you the MSNBC layoffs. And the great irony that journalism is dead and it's leading to the death of their success and the death of their revenue and the death of their jobs. At some point, their worldview is unsustainable. So maybe things aren't really deep down as bad as we think, or these businesses would be flourishing.
Boy, that's a great setup. And it's going to take a second to explain this. Today's news about the layoffs has to do with the two titans in the world of television and cable and film production, NBC, Universal, Comcast.
Right.
So
everybody forgets
really
how the used to be NBC, CBS, ABC. NBC is now
Comcast.
Universal and Comcast. That's the best of the world, the best of the television, the best of the cable.
Those decisions are being made out of Philadelphia, Comcast headquarters. And they are now laying off people, and now they're in union wars with the NBC staff. The NBC news staff out of New York is, without a doubt, the most liberal news office in America. And obviously, their whole system is not doing all that well. So the business, which is Comcast, has decided that having a loss leader at that level isn't as much fun as they thought it would be. And so they're doing what a large conglomerate business would do, is they are moving to adjust costs, because they don't like losing money at the level they're losing it. Now, they're still going to lose money because their ratings are horrible, but they've used NBC News as a way of propagandizing America, and that was fine because they make so much money in other places. But there is a limit to how much money the business is willing to lose.
Do you want to take these one at a time, or will it distract you? Because the one at a time would be when CNN was launched by the Gulf War. All right, and then it took off. Then, kind of like MTV used to be music, and then suddenly it wasn't music at all. It was all reality shows, and you had to go to MTV2 to get music. Then eventually you went to MTV2 and you couldn't even get music. Music television today, I don't know if you noticed this, but they produced 1886 for Sheridan. They produced the new one, which I can't remember what the date is, 1924, whatever it is. I mean, they're not doing anything in music. All right, so everybody's doing this. Then CNN goes in to talk. Now suddenly they had to have CNN headline news to get news. Now sometimes you can't even get that. You know, they have all these different things. Here's the bottom line. When NBC entered the fold, they entered it with a Microsoft, what do you call it? They're thinking they were so clever to be social media. They were online, on the air with Microsoft and NBC, and it was MSNBC. And I said, well, the trouble with this is if you play the biased cable news 24-hour psycho wars, you're taking NBC with you. And they destroyed the NBC News images. That's something ABC didn't have to suffer. CBS didn't have to suffer. It was all just CNN, MSNBC, and so on. Then the death of network television, right? In prime time. So there's really nothing to make up for those losses. I mean, nobody watches the 6 o'clock news anymore from NBC. That wasn't going to hurt them. Late night talk is hurting them because it looks like a cable television talk show. And then they don't have their primetime lineup. I mean, there's nowhere to find this money, David. You got to lay people off.
Well, again, because Comcast is a publicly traded company in their conglomerate, as is Disney, there is an end. At the end, there is a responsibility to shareholders. Now, I'm not a big fan of publicly traded corporations. Never have been, because you enter into an arrangement with people that promises have to be kept, and sometimes those promises can run right over the top of the heads of what you're trying to do with ongoing vision for future. Sometimes those promises run right over the heads of the people that you're employed with, even the quality of your product line. It's very difficult to be managed by committee, and let's not kid ourselves. Shareholders are the biggest committee. So they got problems.
6,000 jobs at Disney.
And
thousands
this is happening
at MSNBC. Yeah. We've already had them
this
at
is
CNN.
happening all across the media. Yeah. And it's really intimating what we've been talking about. It's people are fed up, they're tired, they're going other places. Now, Iger from Disney was on, of all places, was on MSNBC this morning, which had to be kind of hilarious because these are two warring forces.
Right.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Disney and Universal are more than just a theme park battle. They are media conglomerate giants. And Comcast is the biggest dog in the fight always because their passive revenue is absolutely astronomical. What they get from cable bills from all of us that live in Comcast hell is every single month it comes in. It comes
and that's eroding for them too. Technology is eroding that. It's eroding. Yeah, I mean they're in it.
Well, and that's one of the interesting things that Iger said on MSNBC is, first off, as the headlines read, one of the things that he said was that he only plans to be at Disney another 2 years. We'll see whether that comes true or not. The second thing he said was that he recognizes the futures in streaming. Now, that's very problematic for Disney because a lot of people dropped their Disney Plus accounts because of the woke reality of what they were propagating with kids. And I think that the whole woke thing is one thing when you're talking about it in college. It's another thing when you're talking about propagandizing 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old kids. Right, on Disney Plus. That is really problematic. It's not a fair fight. And we've been saying if you want to have a fair fight about the honest history of America versus revisionist history, that's fine. Let's have it at a level where people can defend themselves intellectually. Let's not propagandize children. Well, this whole Proud Family thing and that clip and all that stuff is just, it's
sickening.
Pure propaganda, and it's frightening.
All right, so now I'm going to go a little darker, if I can. I have noticed with these big media companies that they sometimes are a poker tell. They sometimes act first. And my concern is that long before this, now, because this whole woke problem, this whole technology problem, this whole digital delivery problem, and people not watching shows live and how do networks thrive, then you just put crap on, Young Sheldon, Hell's Kitchen, all these shows that are FBI this, FBI that, FBI that, and then fire this, fire that. See, Chicago this, Chicago that. They basically just punted, and nobody's watching any of it. But they tend to signal themselves. We saw it with with COVID. We saw it with election fraud before it started happening and before the discussion started. There were leaders of these companies warning people in their company and trying to control the direction of content heading into it as if they're on some kind of advisory committee and doing some pre-work. I'm wondering if somebody's trying to create a recession, are they doing it on purpose? Are they trying to, just like when you cancel this league, it causes the other leagues to have to follow? If you start doing layoffs here, it causes them to do layoffs here for a purpose or an advantage in controlling what content there is when it does hit the fan? I mean,
all right.
We've seen that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's been that way in the past. First of all, they knew that wokeness, this is an investment they have made in indoctrinating the American people, in rewriting history, in changing reality daily through bias. This has been well, you go back to Woodrow Wilson, but television goes back to the 50s. Could have been here earlier. This has been going on for decades, and when they take their hits, they take their hits. ESPN knows they'd be much better off and much less vulnerable if they weren't so woke. But the wokeness comes from Disney, and it gets to ESPN.
Or it's covered by Disney. It's protected by Disney.
If you want me to keep talking, it'd be this question. They've been losing money for a long time. It's been heading in the wrong direction. Why are they all laying off now? Because one finally did and they're following suit? Or they're trying to create a collective directive?
Might be two separate reasons on this one, Michael. Again, I will only work in media reports now. It appears that Disney has two large shareholders that are putting a lot of pressure on them in regards to the way the company's being run and the bottom line. Disney has not paid any earnings to their shareholders since COVID. They have delayed earnings to their shareholders. Now, that's a pretty bold move, and it's got to come to an end sooner or later. So these layoffs for Disney,
I get that,
were announced. Yeah, they were announced during the earnings report back out to Wall Street. So it was very uncomfortable to have those two things in the same context of conversation. But there's also, on the Disney side, we can't overinflate the layoffs because Disney's moving all of its corporate people from California to Florida, and a good number of them don't want to come.
Isn't that, wait a minute.
And so
time out. Isn't that a conversation in and of itself?
Sure it is.
Their woke worldview is right in line with California. So why are they moving everybody to Florida? Because
there's a lot of reasons for that. Is basically because it's a much healthier climate to do business in and to make money in Florida. And so they're coming to Florida.
And salaries don't pay income tax.
Right, but a lot of people are not going to come with them on that deal. So those are some of those jobs in there too. But Disney does have rival shareholders that with large portions that are putting a lot of pressure on the board because it hasn't been paying dividends. So they've got to pay dividends. So if Iger's going to pay the dividends, he's got to make it work from somewhere. And this is where he's chosen to make it work. It's not that Disney isn't making money or that they haven't rebounded from COVID. They had a good last quarter. Now, the streaming question is a different question, and that's someplace where consumers can log in. I had a Disney Plus account, and I dropped it because it was bad situation. I tried to put it back on because I thought there might be some things coming that would be interesting and helpful. And when I ran across
the story I sent you today tells me we haven't missed a thing.
Oh, no. We're right. Exactly.
I can turn on the Grammys and find out that I am convicted with no evidence.
It was, so there's nothing there. So that's been harmful because it was Disney Plus that saved Disney's tail when they shut down through COVID because they accelerated so many subscriptions because they brought Hamilton in.
Right.
And
others, and a lot of the classics.
Among others, and that brought a lot of things going forward for them. And Star Wars and all the other things. But now that's something that they've not been doing well with. So these things are a little bit more complicated. Now, Disney does news creation on ABC, but it doesn't have a half a dozen other affiliates like Comcast does,
right,
through MSNBC. So trailing these things down, there's no way to avoid the fact that woke is very dangerous for a consumer-driven corporation because most people don't get it and they're not interested in it. And Michael, one point on why people struggle so much on getting it is this. We understand that we have an imperfect history and that we are in a constant position of trying to make this a more perfect union, and people have failed. In recent years, we've decided to focus far more on our failures than our successes. So there's a dominant negative theme that goes across, and it's been exploited dramatically by organizations like Black Lives Matters and activists in the LGBTQ community. There's no question about that whatsoever. There's just one problem. Everybody in their history has gotten a raw deal somewhere along the line. We've gotten to the point now where you can do these cartoon events where people standing allegedly alive today use the word "we" and identify with offenses that happened 300 years ago, as if
it happened to them.
Offenses happened to them
in real time. They want to enact animosity, hatred, or conviction towards people that weren't even alive when it happened. It's just, and it's insane.
How do you live that way? How do you possibly live
when
that way?
When multiculturalism leads to no culture, what do you have?
Exactly. The human being cannot live without a point of forgiveness and hope.
All right,
this is a hopeless pit that they're throwing themselves into.
So the hot topic is woke broke? Well, and why is it going broke? There's no sign they're seeing how out of touch they are with the values and beliefs of their consumers, nor is there any sign that they're wanting to repent and change their product or agenda. It just isn't selling. And so now you know who's broke? They're laid off employees. More with David Zidani when we come back on WTN. I'm Michael DelGirono for Paul Winkler Inc. One of the things I love about Paul and his team is that they voluntarily hold themselves to the highest level of fiduciary duty out there. And because of that, the government requires that I tell you I'm paid every time this commercial airs, and that there's an incentive for me to say good things about Paul and his team. It's funny other industries don't require that, but hey, I don't make the rules. I'm actually a client of Paul's, and I can tell you that he brings an understanding of the investing world I haven't seen anywhere else in all my years. He helps me understand what I'm doing and why, so I don't worry about investing or second guess my decisions. There's nothing more unnerving than getting close to retirement age and wondering, have you saved?
I taught a lot about how markets work and how we invest money and academic principles of investing money. But I've also talked an awful lot about how to avoid the mistakes that people often make with their money. Think about it. A lot of people sold out of the market at the worst time when COVID struck, or when TARP happened, the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or gold, they invested in that at the worst time. Bailing out of the market because they were worried about Y2K or 9/11 or jumping into energy stocks or jumping into cryptocurrency. One of the things that I like to do is educate investors, because I believe that the more educated you are, the more confident you are, and the more confident you are, the more successful you can be as an investor. Now, I not only do that on our radio show, but we do that in our offices around the Nashville region, 10 offices. To learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call. Or you can call 615-851-1950.
All right, the state Senate has passed that so-called drag show bill. We'll tell you what's next. In our nation's capital, the House Oversight Committee making it official, formally requesting business records from President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. These stories and more coming up at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
You know, David made the comment moments ago that, it's one thing to have heated debate or discussions with adults, and it's another to hit kids with cartoons, with things that are so inappropriate. I could play a lot of Disney things for you, but the one in question, just to show you in all their brokenness, they'll lay off employees, but they won't lay off the woke indoctrination. This is the Disney Plus kids cartoon called The Proud Family. Now, I'll do the typical thing we always do in talk radio, which is, can you imagine if a cartoon had all white people, an all white family, telling children how bad black people are? Of course, it would be canceled on arrival, but the reverse is permissible. This is divisive. It's toxic. It's destructive. It even throws in Lincoln didn't free the slaves, ridiculous theory. But this is how Disney is teaching our children. I'm going to add to what David said and say Disney and Disney name only. This is antithetical to everything Walt Disney envisioned, but this is how they're talking about our history. By the way, can you hear it? Hang on. Maybe you're not hearing it.
This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country. Tilled this land from sea to sea to sea. First there was rice, tobacco, sugar cane. Then Whitney did his thing and cotton became king. And we were its soldiers, 4 million strong. Fighting for America's freedoms, even though we remained America's slaves. Built this country. The descendants of slaves continue to build it. Slaves built this country. And we, the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering. And continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in the systemic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for. Slaves built this country. Not only field hands, but carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, musicians, inventors built cities from Jamestown to New Orleans to Banneker, Washington. 40 acres and a mule. We'll take the 40 acres, keep the mule. We made your families rich. From the southern plantation heirs to the northern bankers to the New England ship owners, the founding fathers, former presidents, current senators, the Illuminati, the New World Order. Slaves built this country. We had Tubman, Turner, Frederick D. Didn't they say Lincoln freed the slaves? But slaves were men and women, and only we can free ourselves. Emancipation is not freedom. Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, public schools, feeding private prisons, where we become slaves again. As we celebrate Juneteenth for the umpteenth time, our account is still outstanding.
They're demanding reparations. I think you get the gist of it now. At some point, you've got to ask yourself, I think even AOC would be offended by this. This is Disney today, and you wonder why generations hate this country, are ashamed of this country, and probably the very next generation will be at war with this country. It's 11 o'clock. News starts now.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Still got those gusty winds under a wind advisory for another hour. And it's not out of the possibility you could see gusts up to 45 miles per hour. Those high-profile vehicles out there, you all definitely want to take this into account on your trip today. Full forecast coming up in 2 minutes. Right now in Tennessee, the state Senate has passed a bill that criminalizes certain public performances where children could see them. This includes drag shows, go-go shows, or strippers. Democrats complained in a recent hearing that the language is too vague and could have unintended consequences, like when children wear costumes. But Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson responded,
I don't know how I can be more clear, Mr. Chairman. This bill only deals with sexually explicit, sexually graphic entertainment.
Next stop for this bill will be a House committee hearing scheduled for next week. Right now in our nation's capital, the House Oversight Committee is formally requesting business records of President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, the president's brother, James Biden, and their former business partner, Eric Schwerin. The committee's investigating whether President Biden had any involvement in his son's foreign business dealings, including with China. Committee Chair James Comer of Kentucky giving the Bidens until February 22nd to respond, or they could be subpoenaed. Chinese surveillance balloons setting off a series of briefings and hearings on Capitol Hill today. Here's Justin Finch.
Tough questions for defense and Joint Chiefs of Staff officials testifying Thursday. The Senate Appropriations Committee probing them for answers about what the Chinese government was observing and why the U.S. did not act sooner to remove that balloon from American airspace. Vice Chair Patty Murray saying the incident raises concerning questions.
Not just because of the breach of our airspace, but what it signals about our relationship with China, the strength of our diplomacy, and really the state of our domestic capabilities.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, at 11:07, we have fair skies in Franklin, 61 degrees. Sunny and 65 in Mount Juliet. Sunny and 64 down in the borough. Downtown on Music Row, partly cloudy skies, naked statues, 63 degrees. It feels like 61. The market, the Dow's up 93, NASDAQ up 37, the S&P up 9. All three are in the green. The market is slightly up at 11:08. I'm Michael DelGirono for Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. Jeff Eddy and his team are simply the best and the most affordable. And the best is not my opinion. They do residential, light commercial. They service all brands, all technologies, conventional and geothermal. They're recognized by one of the leading brands, Rheem, as providing customers with the highest level of year-round comfort and service. What a great description of what I've enjoyed for 14 years. They're an Elite Pro partner with Rheem. They're a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi. If electric heat is your necessity or choice, best products, maintenance, and pricing. And for everyone, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. Simply the best. Affordable? Well, you do your maintenance on your air conditioners in the spring, heaters in the fall. Doesn't matter how many units you have, it can't exceed $125 a home. I have 3. You may have more. $125 a home. Cleans them up, checks them out, gets them all ready to go and run energy efficiently. You get the $125 back in energy savings. But you avoid hundreds avoiding repairs and thousands avoiding early replacement. Never too soon to get your air conditioner's maintenance before spring turns to summer. Whether it's maintenance, repair, or replacement, trust who I trust. Jeff Eddy's Efficient Heating and Cooling of Tennessee. Call 784-4424, 784-4424, or online at efficienthvac.net. Well, one way of looking at it is we've come a long way since it's a small world, haven't we? I mean, we could do an entire show on Walt Disney's vision, morals, values, rules for those values, vision for entertaining our children to what it's become. That clip is just vile and disgusting. And that's a cartoon on Disney. So that's why the discussion today is woke broke? After all, death of journalism is leading to death of revenue, which is leading to death of jobs. So it's becoming very broke. MSNBC with massive layoffs to join CNN, and now massive walkouts at NBC over the massive layoffs. Disney laying off 7,000 to save $5.5 billion. And then as we were getting ready to discuss, conservatives reacting, saying the company will sink unless it returns to its traditional roots. Not necessarily the traditional roots of America, but maybe the traditional roots of Walt Disney, as I'm suggesting. But based on the clip I just played you from the Proud family, just this week, that doesn't seem to be the case, David. I don't think they're going to awaken anytime soon.
Well, Michael, I know these numbers look like you could say, well, there's a boycott mentality out there and people are just not participating any longer with Disney and therefore they're suffering. It's kind of like a one-to-one relationship. I'm honestly not sure that there's enough evidence yet to prove that. Disney had a good quarter last quarter. I'm not inside their books well enough to know. I don't know. Now, if there's insiders who do know, and whistleblowers who come out to explain that might be something that's more valid, but I don't have all the numbers. I'm also not in a position of attempting to defend any of these companies because the major media corporations that run America right now are doing great harm to our country because of things like that particular clip. But I want to talk about the clip, the anger, the outrage in children. And I want to ask everyone to consider the simple thought. Where has the society ever gone forward looking backwards? Now, the answer is, well, if they hold on to their history and their history is genuine and real and truthful, and they learn from their past, yes, they can look backward and forward. But it's interesting because one of the claims in the film is that someone has to atone for these offenses of 300 years ago. Well, why not go back 400 or 500 years? Or better yet, who is atoning for offenses that happened to my parents when they came here as immigrants? Someone has to atone for that. In other words, when we're going to extract atonement and attempt to do that from other people as opposed to justice, we've really lost our way. And if you're going to create a culture that is predicated upon perpetual offense, you eliminate the hope of forgiveness at any point in time. How do you
move forward? You can't.
Forward?
You don't. We're not.
Psychologically,
we're not is the answer.
It's spiritually not possible. And what's frightening about this is for people who advocate this point of view, as if it somehow is a form of biblical justice, they seem to be forgetting the entire New Testament concept of forgiveness. I mean, this is some strange thinking for humans to go forward with. And it's not a part it's certainly not a part of a biblical Christian reality. Now, I know this is the hottest issue and people are going to take grave offense. And I get it. We've been here. We've seen this. When you get into the identity politics that are built upon offense, there's no way out with a person who chooses to be offended.
That's a loud Aquafina. I apologize.
That's all right. I mean, but it comes back to the teachings of Jesus Christ when he talks about the speck in your brother's eyes and the plank in yours. I would like to ask Christian people who are sharing this offense, regardless of the color of their skin, are we sure we have the right to demand atonement from people standing here today?
Well, I mean, I can't say it any differently than I've been saying it all morning long. This cultural wokeness has led to and creates legal chaos. All right. So it doesn't even make legal sense. If a white guy does something today, I shouldn't have to pay the price for it. I'm not the white guy who did it. If a white guy did it 300 years ago, all white people shouldn't have to pay. There's no justice for those that were harmed through slavery. And you or I are not proud of slavery. We're not the only country, by the way, that participated in slavery. But there's nothing I can do, and that really wouldn't atone it anyway. Though that generation of believers will be responsible for that generation of souls and their actions before God. But that's where we cut to the chase, though, right? They're trying to build a world without a God. So then you got to build a new justice system, and you got to build a new way. By the way, that wouldn't atone. Then how we harmed white people today.
Yeah, this is hard stuff to talk about because it's very difficult for people to have contextual conversation about biblical Christianity and hold to spirits of non-forgiveness based upon all the things that they say exist. This is a very hard conversation to align with true biblical Christianity. And I have to, Michael, look, we're two white guys or two Italian guys. If this was the 1940s, we'd be considered half white.
Right.
Do your history. That's there and that's real.
I could do a spit test. I won't, but I might even be only half white. I don't know.
At this stage in the game, you're not allowed to have these conversations if you're not the right color. I will tell you that I've spoken to very credible, very honest, and very genuine Black Christians who are deeply studied in these fields. I'm telling you what they're telling me, that if we do not return to a doctrine of forgiveness through Christ that is equal for all, and we don't learn to forgive as we have been forgiven, we have no hope as a nation. Period. You cannot survive on this planet without forgiveness. That's why Jesus.
Well, that's why I thought it was so interesting.
One of the reasons why he came here.
Yeah, of course. And by the way, I'm watching Lizzo at the Grammys talk about how human beings are inherently good. Well, if that were true, there was no reason for God to send Christ. There was no reason for Christ to live by example and be perfect and be crucified and suffer and die and then resurrected and defeating death. If man was inherently good, there'd be no reason for Jesus. Well, that's why for those that think man are inherently good, they don't have any use for Jesus until they walk themselves into a corner of a room they can't get out of.
We're in a very deep intellectual.
Well, I know, but where I'm trying to keep it simple is here they are going broke and laying off people by and large. Their products are suffering. And at a time where you're just saying a republic, well, I said it this way. Cultural wokeness creates legal chaos. And any individual can reject God, but if we collectively reject God, you have to dispose of the republic. As John Quincy Adams said, altogether wrong for an immoral people. It becomes a self-imploding bomb. So, all right, so that's the trajectory we're on. But in this topic, the death of journalism is leading to the death of their revenue, leading to their cutback and death of jobs, and they're still doubling down, which I think is one of the most horrific Disney attacks ever. this week in the midst of the layoffs. I mean, they're not, so if I don't have hope for Disney to repent, is America gonna anytime soon? I mean, that's an inappropriate discussion and attack and a State of the Union, let alone to target children watching Disney Plus and parents who think Disney Plus is safe for their kids to watch.
I hope so, and I hope that I am repenting sufficiently myself.
That'd be my
understand something. I'm not talking about repenting before the powers that be in the major media corporations that have seized upon these political interpretations of life and reality. I'm not talking about bowing the knee.
No, I have no use for them or I stand against them. I'm talking about in the sight of God.
And I'm talking about philosophically. Right. This entire form of doctrine, regardless of any color applied to it, is an impossible place for which humans can live. We must come to terms with the fact that there are no perfect human beings. We are made of dust. We all fall down. And if we do not have a methodology of forgiveness, then why do we pray the Lord's Prayer? So many of these people go to churches where they pray the Lord's Prayer every single week, and yet they don't read the verse immediately following, thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, in many translations, where Jesus says, and if you don't forgive as you have been forgiven, you won't be forgiven. We forget that part of the equation. You cannot survive where we are as a country. No, a corporation can't make it either.
No, it's unsustainable, and the early signs are not being taken by them. I hope they're being taken by all that are listening. Or when we come back, we're going to turn the corner to the president's sit down. I heard a promo of Brian Wilson's. The president had a lot of energy at the State of the Union. He didn't have a lot of
much the next day, huh?
Not so much the next day. And the answers are very, very peculiar and troubling. So is journalism dead? Yes. Are the jobs dead? Yes. What's left of the republic and this president who based a speech on a lie and now is touring on that lie when we come back on WTN. It's 11:19.
Well, the state Senate has passed that so-called drag show ban. We'll tell you where it heads next. And a lot going on in our nation's capital, including a deadline given to Hunter Biden, President Biden's brother, and the Biden's business partner. We'll tell you about it at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Well, that legislation was in the nick of time because this show's been a drag. So at least we know we're... different kind, right? Thank you. That's what I was waiting for. Wait a minute. If you do that again, we have cameras now. Do it again. You ready? There. Got the hip. I got my stupid little back screen thing on for David, and you can't see it. It's 11:23. No, it's not a drag. It's just deep conversations we got to have, and nobody on radio wants to have them. Everybody just, I never made my point that I was going to make earlier. And that is that, and Dan did a great job and played a great montage this morning, which I really enjoyed listening to, and I loved his take on it. You wonder where all this hatred's coming from. Well, when you turn on the left media and the left matrix, and they're just trashing on the right, which is what Dan played a montage of. But, if I wanted to, I could find a right montage and play it. And if that just seems like he's what a loser. Why would he say that? I'm just trying to show you that you can be in a matrix too. When David and I talk about forgiveness and atonement, listen, when I watch that cartoon clip and I know that that's going after vulnerable children that might grow up and really hate people for being white and take action upon it, that makes me enraged. I could create a clip right now that somebody could put in a montage of the right talking bad about the left. I'm talking bad about the worldview. I'm talking bad about the false gospel. I'm talking bad about the chaos and problems it's creating, and it's not even self-sufficient for their business. They're having to lay people off. That's how committed they are to winning this false worldview argument. But I want you to, David and I just want you to understand, we're not going to play the far right narrative. We're not going to play the far left and demonize the far left narrative. We're going to be the same people that stand in the middle and speak the truth. And I think we're going to be the first to go. There's going to be no use for us first. But I want you to know this gospel doesn't work. There's no forgiveness. This gospel doesn't work for a republic, period. This is going to lead to a civil war. And the clip that Dan played that I wish we could replay is, they're calling you Nazis. They're calling you dangerous. They're calling you evil. That's war words. And then you're going to bring up old things that caused wars just to kind of throw some accelerant at it for the next generation. This is dangerous stuff we're talking about. It may not be exciting, and it'd be much more entertaining to just bash Joe Biden. I can play a clip of Joe. He's so sleepy. I want to take a nap. But that's not the real danger we're in. And we're all on the plane together that's crashing. So, but I hope it hasn't been a drag.
Michael, you take a look at the comment you just
I'm dying to know what your T-shirt is. It's driving me crazy. What does that say? I'm ADD and I can't. Mickelson? Oh, Mick's Gym. You never boxed. Did you?
You didn't have to box to buy a wannabe T-shirt.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, if you boxed like I boxed, that's another crazy thing we have in common that...
No.
That would have scared me.
Strictly playground fights.
Oh, okay.
Had a comment
Translation, Chris must have said something. Go ahead.
Yeah, on an earlier interview here in Florida this morning, we had a similar conversation. And I mentioned the fact that one of the things that in studying history for a lifetime, the team at our organization has been in the situation where we've had to ask the question, why did the Civil War happen? And when you study it and study it and study it and study it, you find that there's one agency that could have stopped it from happening. And that was the believing Church of Jesus Christ. And they hid their light under a bushel. They were the one redemptive agency that could have stopped the Civil War from happening.
What could have stopped Nazi Germany in World War I and II from happening?
Well, there you go. Read the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and ask the same question. In the land of Luther, where was the church? Where were believing people? And right now we have the opportunity to stand for a gospel of both redemption and atonement and forgiveness and go forward. And because there is no life without forgiveness. There is no life without forgiveness. And we have to ask ourselves the question, if we don't do that, are we just being played by people? You see, without God in the equation, the state becomes the direction of God, and people begin to get messianic tendencies. And so they begin to stand for justice in a way, in a fashion that justice is unaccomplishable by humans. Nobody is perfect. So where do you go with that? If you can't find a way to go to the manger and into the cross and into the empty tomb, then how do you deal with the offense?
How do you live moving forward?
How do you define it, first off, even if it is an offense? Do you have the right to make that claim for atonement?
Boy, that's a personal conversation we had as a family in the house. People who have been canceled by culture, and people doing the same things today that are not being canceled. That's why I always use the term, David. They've weaponized it. It becomes a weapon, and they can use it on you, but not on them. They can use it on this one. It's all at the end about control. And I'll tell you, and you know what? This is getting really deep, but they mostly misunderstand God by looking at his people rather than Christ. And then they love to misunderstand God and say that, I can't believe in God because what God would do this, go around and target, and they blame him for all the things. I don't believe in some God that's just going to control you. And I serve a God of complete free will. I don't know how he does it. As a father, I don't have that kind of free will that I grant my children. I don't. I try to. I fight to. I try to be the silent. I've modeled my fatherhood after the prodigal son father. I really have.
Well, let's remember, though, this God you're talking about knows the end from the beginning.
Well,
He
yeah.
knows the end of the journey.
Exact. But, I serve a God of grace and mercy, but free will. If I want to reject him, if I want to rebel against him, he'll allow it. But this new God they're creating will not allow it. You are not allowed to disagree with them. You are not allowed to have a different thought. You are not allowed to live a different way. It is all a weapon of control. We saw it with COVID. We see it with global warming. Hey, we're seeing it with Disney.
I know we got to go to news. One last quick 30-second story is this. If we continue to follow in this direction, then one song we must wipe from our national identity is the song Amazing Grace. The one song that everybody knows and everybody can sing at least one verse. It's got to go, because Amazing Grace was written by a man who had been in the slave trade business.
Well, more tragically, the Republic will have to go, and it's going. It's 11:30. All right, Sleepy Joe, when we come back, let's give those on the right something to tickle their ears with. And it's a teachable moment. A lot of you are struggling. Is Joe Biden a liar, or is he just cognitively impaired? Well, I'll play the clip and let you decide next. News starts now.
11:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Right now in Tennessee, the state Senate has passed that so-called drag show ban bill that criminalizes any sexually explicit performance in a public place where children could see it. It goes to the House next week. A lot going on in our nation's capital. The Oversight Committee giving President Biden's son Hunter, his brother James Biden, and their business partner until February 22nd to turn over business records, or they could be subpoenaed. And the Chinese surveillance balloon setting off a series of briefings and hearings on Capitol Hill today. This is Pentagon official Melissa Dalton defending how it was handled.
The water depths offshore, the Aleutians, at 6+ nautical miles go very quickly from about 150 feet to over 18,000 feet. Near the Bering Sea. The winter water temperatures in the Bering Sea hover consistently in the low 30s, which would make recovery and salvage operations very dangerous.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, it's 11:34. We have fair sky, windy conditions. Fair sky, 61 degrees at the Puffy Muffin. If you haven't figured it out yet, temperatures are falling. We reached our high of 64 early in the morning, and now we're going to make our way into the 50s. So the temperatures have fallen again. 61 at the Puffy Muffin, 64 to the north in Hendersonville. Downtown, partly cloudy skies, 62 degrees. It feels like 60 at WTN. Speaking of falling, so is the market. The Dow was once up 200. It's now down $11. NASDAQ was once up 180. It's now up $3, and the S&P was up 30. Now it's down $1.62. So the market is volatile and basically flat, but volatile as we speak at 11:34. I want to talk to you about Blue Umbrella Medical Center of Middle Tennessee. Dr. Jay Hitson and her team of very talented physicians and MDs are different. First of all, we think you are coming for answers. You deserve answers. So we're going to use state-of-the-art lab testing to get real answers. That'll address one of the frustrations you have. Then we're going to do advanced diagnostic testing to get to the root cause of your problem. And then we're going to treat that root cause with cutting-edge regenerative treatments. And that's going to provide actual relief for a change. So if you're frustrated with healthcare that's really sick care and no answers and no relief, I recommend Blue Umbrella Medical Center. Now, a great example is neuropathy, acute, chronic, and crippling. We're going to get to that root cause. We're going to treat it with regenerative treatments, and we're going to stimulate, reactivate, and regenerate the damaged tissue and nerve endings. That provides immediate relief and long-term relief. So doctors are telling you that there's no solution for neuropathy. Think again and call Blue Umbrella. It's covered by insurance, and it begins with a free consultation. Actual health care with real results. Call 610-6937 today, 610-6937, or online at blueumbrellamedical.com. Information fueled, opinion driven. That's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Closing moments at 11:36. Final say. I'm going to actually do what most people in talk radio are going to do. I'm going to play a clip of the president. Now, I just want to set everything back up. David Zanotti joining us from American Policy Roundtable in the Public Square. As I said before the State of the Union address, this president is going to base his address on a false reality, an illusion, and a lie. Where can the address go from there? Well, when we actually watched it, the answer was nowhere. We were a little shocked that the president didn't really address, and I think I'm going to give my other game ball today. We did one for a state representative in Arkansas who defended the governor being attacked by Gavin Newsom. The other would go to Gannett and USA Today, who did an op-ed piece and just called it for what it really was. That wasn't a serious State of the Union. It didn't address you, the people. So what was it? Which was a fascinating op-ed piece. So he bases it on a lie. He makes it purely a campaign and political speech based on a lie. It eventually has a couple of crescendo moments where, you know, instead of talking about the real problems, he tries to convince you everything's great, and the Republicans are coming after old people's Social Security and Medicare, which isn't even a possibility. Just creates a straw man out of thin air. So the answer to the Tuesday morning question is, where does the State of the Union speech go when it's based on a lie? Into more lies. And boy, did it. And now the speech is over. He's on tour with these lies. In fact, he's chasing David. He's in Florida, schlepping the same lie that Republicans are going after Social Security and Medicare, which is simply not true. But then he sits down with a lot less energy with PBS and Judy Woodruff, and she asks this question, and I'll break it down for you.
Have relations now between the U.S. and China taken a big hit, frankly?
No.
How do you know?
I know. I talked to him.
You've talked to...
I got to stop right there. Have relations with China taken a big hit? President very confidently, because remember, we're all trying to figure out, is this guy senile or a liar? Very confidently, no. She stares at him. He goes, no. If she had just moved on, it would have just been no. And I guess we would have all had to trust the president of the United States that everything's fine with China, even though they were doing a surveillance balloon. And he shot it down. But she follows up. How do you know? Now, he was very convinced and told you very convincingly, no, there's no problem with our relation. Well, how do you know? Because I talked to him. Now, let's just change the analogy for a second. Let's say I got on the air and I just started talking about how David Zanotti really off the air a jerk. Can't stand him. He's a jerk. Talked Christian good on the air, but off the air. Chain smoker, jerk, mean to people. And then you would call and you go, well, how's your relationship with David since you said that? Has it changed? Has it gotten worse? No. Well, how do you know? Because I talked to him. Your assumption would be I've talked to him since I said that, right? Not Joe. So now I'm going to start it over. Watch the flow. Remember, what we really want to know is, do we have a liar? Now, here's the problem for Joe Biden. He hasn't always been old and he hasn't always been senile, but he's always been a liar. He's always been a plagiarist. He's always been a rascal. He's always been a vicious political fighter and a political animal. Senile or liar? I say liar, and I say PBS finally earned all our tax dollars. They proved it when no one else could.
Relations now between the U.S. and China taken a big hit, frankly.
No.
How do you know?
I know. I talked to him.
You've talked to Xi
Talked to Xi
Jinping
Jinping before. And our team talks to their people.
during this and since?
After I haven't talked to him during this.
Oh.
But look, I mean, the idea of shooting down a balloon that's gathering information over America, that makes relations worse. Look, I made it real clear to Xi Jinping that we're going to compete fully with China, but we're not looking for conflict, and that's been the case so far.
What do you make of that, David?
Michael, I'm sorry I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. I forgot that doesn't go to you. He's basically saying, she asks if relations are in trouble with China since shooting down the balloon. He says no. And she looks at him. He goes, no. And she goes, how do you know that? Because I talked to him. And then she goes, and then he basically admits he hasn't talked to them since shooting it down. But before it, he talked to them, which didn't answer the question and blatantly lies. And then he goes, this whole notion that this would be, jeopardizing to our relationship is ridiculous. And I made it very clear before this that we'll compete with you, but we don't want conflict with you. Well, I think shooting down their balloon might be perceived as conflict by them.
Probably most people are asking who's running the show.
Well, we know.
Because it's crystal clear that somebody is writing the lines for Joe Biden. And when he's reading the lines they wrote, he can be quite combative and even entertaining for a period of time. But when he's got to answer in-depth behind-the-scene questions, he acts like someone who either doesn't know or can't tell you what he really knows, or somebody else is making up all the lines and they don't have the bug in his ear. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, we talked about how all this wokeness is creating legal crisis and chaos and a clear and present danger for our republic. I think a lot of our enemies think we're going to implode from within. But this kind of weakness certainly invites. History says it invites.
And look, there's a lot of people who love America who are concerned about the same thing, Michael. I mean, that clown show that we watched as the State of the Union address is the kind of behavior that Congress participated in before the Civil War. I mean, before the Civil War, there were members walking across the floor, beating on one another physically in the hostilities of all this. I mean, Congress wasn't the institution that was going to save the country from slavery. It had to be the people who saved the country from slavery and then saved the country from the Civil War. And the thing about all of that horror that we saw, as we mentioned before, is we got to remember we elected those people, and the American people elected Joe Biden. So how can our opponents not think we are just like those folks? Do they count the opposing numbers? I mean, it's a fascinating fact that you'll listen to people tell you that Donald Trump lost the last two elections. This is his third loss, that in fact, he lost the popular vote in those elections. He lost the popular vote twice. He lost, but they don't mention to you that Republican voters outpolled Democrat voters in the congressional races just last year. That fact is buried. That fact is buried. So the question is, which of these two people groups are going to prevail and change the leadership of the country? And you've got to change it both in Washington, D.C., and you've got to change it both here locally. You've got to change it everywhere. It's got to be changed. And that's it. Joe, look, I mean, we got to move off of Joe Biden because there's just no more story left there.
No, but I think it, look, where do you go with a State of the Union address that's based on a lie, into lies? And then where do you go after the State of the Union? You start touring the country with the same lie. In this case, it kind of has taken the shape of the false straw man of attacking Social Security, but the lies continue. And, you know,
see, what you're doing is you're following the circus out of town.
Well, yeah, okay. No, I get it.
Great. I mean, it's really
but I want to go full circle back to the USA Today and their op-ed piece. And that is, all right, so what is the State of the Union? A successful State of the Union is first accurate, right? And this wasn't. So while all America's hurting, this president's telling everybody it's great. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's a body blow.
So that's the first thing. What's the second thing? It has creative solutions to the most pressing, urgent problems. This didn't. It didn't address any of them. In fact, it created a false one that doesn't even exist.
All right, we're going to need to have some button that we can push now, like you do with Walker on the Republican thing. This isn't Republican. I'm to the point where every time I fall back into expectations from the 1950s, I have to remind myself that this State of the Union address was a sham from the beginning because the president stood up as the administrator of the administrative state, telling Congress what you would do or won't do. So when these op-eds come out saying, what's a State of the Union supposed to be? Let me tell you something. That might have worked 50 years ago. But today you've got a president who is the bully in the bully pulpit. And he's telling you the administrative state is going forward on this direction, and I'm just going to light you up because I know you don't like it, but guess what? If you don't do what I tell you to do, I veto it.
Well,
when are they going to write those op-eds?
Well, I mean, and he may for 2 years, but this may not fly moving forward. I mean, he's in Florida today trying to convince everybody in Florida that is prospering, that the country's prospering, like Florida's prospering, and that they're going to come at. I mean,
what on
earth? If you're going to go try to scare old people, of course you'd go to Florida, right? Why are you laughing?
Because Rick Scott today here in Florida is launching a media campaign, basically attacking Biden for attacking him in the State of the Union address. And Rick Scott knows how to make commercials, and he's got plenty of money to air them. Biden is walking into a fight with Rick Scott on home ground that is not going to play in Florida, no matter what the media tries to do with it. So you tell me, I have no idea.
Well, let me tell you where I'm going.
What Podesta's doing.
This is where I am at, just so everybody is clear. 61% of his party doesn't want him to run again. And I know there's no way Podesta wants him and thinks he can win. Now, he might, but I think he definitely wants Trump, but he'd love to do this governor in Maryland against Trump. He probably would have loved to have done Stacey Abrams against Trump. He might even be interested in doing Gavin Newsom against Trump. I don't know. But he doesn't want Trump. At what point are they feeding him lines to hang himself? Because old Joe keeps going rogue against them, and then he's surrounded by advisors that don't want him, a party that doesn't want him. At what point are they going to sabotage him like they sabotaged Trump? Or tried to sabotage Trump? I don't know if they actually legally pulled it off.
Which is a fascinating question.
Right, that's where I'm headed. It doesn't make sense.
All this setup is
all of a sudden Podesta's got a president doing stupid things. That's not Podesta.
The palace intrigue.
Let me rephrase it.
Or is Podesta so convinced he's going to win with Biden anyhow, he sent him out there to do nothing but light up the Republicans, because the only way for Biden to win is for the Republicans to lose their minds.
Yeah, and take the bait. I get that, but this doesn't seem like that.
And they did take the bait.
I keep waiting. Look, I'm telling you, that was a bad moment when he turned and gave immigration to Kamala Harris. We'll never know if their plan was to hide the old man in the basement who came in 4th in Iowa, 7th in New Hampshire, crafted the deal in South Carolina, hide him in a basement, do the shadow campaign to save the democracy and change election laws, and they get him in there, and then they usher him out and replace him. Now, remember, Podesta ran Clinton for 8 years, and Hillary's person was Kamala Harris. And he also ran Obama for 8 years, and Obama's was Biden. So they take both of them on the same ticket. They get him in. They want to get him out. And when he turned and gave the poison apple on the border to Kamala Harris, and she had to hide for 90 days and eventually apologize to the world, that couldn't have played well with Podesta. And ever since then, I think he's been on his own. And now I think they're actually helping him and feeding him a really bad State of the Union speech and a really bad tour. This is actually getting so. Look, Podesta doesn't lose; he wins. I think we're seeing sabotage, is what I think. I don't even think Joe's this senile. Is he a senile or a liar? He's been a lifelong liar, and he ought to be worried about his way his wife is kissing the second gentleman. But that aside, this is starting to get really.
And so, lest people think that perhaps we're out of points now to make this exciting novel of conspiracy hold together. One thing we can say for certain about John Podesta is he understands the system so well that if he knows he's not going to win the White House, you'll see all of his attention going toward retaking the House and shoring up the Senate. Because if they don't have the White House and they have the Congress, they can continue to win and move the ball forward. Not quite as fast, but always forward.
But
Podesta never misses the next move.
I want George Soros or whoever his henchmen are listening to know that I get it, if nothing else, and David does too. John Podesta is all about the presidency because they go back to the Woodrow Wilson and the good now philosophy. So ultimately, they want an administrative state, and they want administrators they can control over that administrative state. And they hate speakers of the House, and they despise Congress, and they despise the American people. So I'm sorry, you're not going to budge me that he is not ruled out playing for the White House yet. And he's got 2 years to keep throwing these, he's got, I have.
All right, so let me ask you this question.
I've got one other comment that wants to come out like a belch, but I'd rather do it on a golf course than a radio show.
Does he want Trump? Does Podesta want Trump or
yes.
not?
Yes.
Why?
Because he will, just as Donald Trump won because people were galvanized against Hillary Clinton, he gets his base repaired with Donald Trump. That Donald Trump is the devil himself to his base. That cures all. He doesn't even go back and fix everything he's broken. He can start back at even, and then with a good candidate, make up the ground. And plus, Donald Trump has some independent issues too, and some party issues. Don't forget in that last survey that everybody in conservative talk radio likes to quote, 61% of Joe Biden's own party doesn't want him to run again. Well, 50% of Republicans don't want Trump to run again. I'd want to run against that.
So what's Podesta's play if Trump
got to get Biden to step aside. He's got to pull an LBJ, or he might pull a JFK. There, and I belched after all. If you know what I mean.
No, I don't. I don't want disclaimer. The following was a belch. It was you heard it wrong. You heard it completely wrong. And I can assure you that it'll be.
I think Joe Biden's on tour right now, taking the sabotage bait from the people that are surrounding him. There it is. This is a ridiculous argument.
So figuratively speaking, there's a sabotage play that's in process.
So if it continues to be this stupid, I'm going to start questioning that. But that's me, not you, and we're all just thinking out loud. It's 11:52. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. let's do the reverse of it. Let's assume Podesta's loving his current administrative state. He's okay with old Joe, and he thinks as long as it's a wounded Donald Trump, he can win with even Joe. What evidence would you have of that?
Well, I think that one of the things that makes sense there are what are the themes that Joe's rolling out. The State of the Union address was his first speech of his new campaign, so to speak. So what are the pieces and the parts? And you saw all the different things he hit on and all the bait that he threw out to the Republicans. I thought perhaps the most bizarre moment was when he began to speak about the insurrection and then said, and it was the very language of that insurrection that created the violence in the Pelosi household, so to speak. And then Paul Pelosi stood up wearing a hat to remind everybody that he got smacked in the head with a hammer.
Why don't we know more about who attacked him?
Well, we know that it wasn't a Trump
conservative,
supporter
right, yeah,
that attacked him. We know that for sure. But the president rewrote the history as if somebody who literally left January 6th, flew out to California, waited for the moment, and popped Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer. I mean, that's the way it read to anyone who wasn't paying attention to all the details. So there it is.
But the point you're making is by positioning, because let's face it, that's who crafted the State of the Union, including where people were sitting in the presidential boxes. That was done on purpose to position January 6th and Donald Trump, that you can't morally vote for Donald Trump without morally voting for civil war and insurrection.
It was a great speech for the next election to define reality, which is that if you don't do what the president says, you're either an election denier, you hate women, or you want to hit people in the head with hammers.
And then you go home and watch a Disney cartoon and you really feel bad about yourself. David Zanotti with the American Policy Roundtable and host of the Public Square. Thanks for being our guest. The Matt Murphy Show again next. If he needs me, I'll pop on. It's plenty of Super Talk on the way. Don't move.
The White House says it has not ruled out taking possible action against China for violating U.S. airspace with its surveillance balloon. And House